Hey guys, what's up? Bob here. Welcome to a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile. So today we're going to be looking at my Demise Spellbook deck. We've been using this for about, well, a couple of weeks now. I've been testing it a lot, and I want to show you what I came up with. I think this is a pretty good build. I know I've seen a couple of different people, like maybe top, 18ing or whatever, different events. This is a deck that I genuinely think is a bit better than theirs. Just because I think my logic for stuff is a little bit more sound. That said, of course, feel free to disagree with anything I show you, but we're going to go ahead and show you exactly what I'm running in terms of my spellbook deck. So, obviously, monsters and traps are only going to make up about not even half of this deck, all told. It's mostly going to be spells. That's just how it's going to be. So we're just going to go ahead and show you this. I'm only going to show you the main deck and the extra deck doesn't even matter. But, of course, side deck is going to be, your personal preferences, what you think is going to be at your locals or whatever, what you need to be prepared for. And I really can't tell you what that's going to be. For me, it's a lot of Cosmo and a couple of BA, or like Phantom Knight BA. So just think that I'm siding against that, basically. So let's go ahead and show you the main deck. I'll show you my monsters first. We've got triple Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. This guy's really good in a couple of different regards. Most importantly, though, of course, he's going to be able to search your spellbooks, but more importantly than that, he's a searchable body that you can put on the field. This deck always, in my opinion, needs to have a monster on the field to be able to do anything. And I'm talking, you need to have your Fate live. You need to have your Tower live. I know you can have a spellcaster in your graveyard to have Tower live, but for the most part, you always want to have, your Masters live, your Fates live, any of that. For that, you need a monster on the field, and for that, Spellbook Magician of Prophecy is a very, very good option. Just being able to summon him, he lets you go +1, and then he lets you kind of use all your other cards. He's really, really important. More important than pretty much anything else. But that said, next up we've got Double Kaiku, the Ghost Destroyer. Sorry, I can't talk. Double Kaiku is going to allow you to attack over certain things. He's got 1800 attack, prevents your opponent from banishing stuff, and allows you to banish 2 things from your opponent's graveyard whenever he does battle damage. So that's really good, generally speaking. You're just going to be able to kind of control your opponent's graveyard and basically make it so they can't. Now, it's not a huge bonus to make them not able to banish stuff, but it is really good against Cosmo, especially when they have like a spaceship on board. You can just like summon this guy. If you need to attack over stuff, you can do that like with a power or something. But generally speaking, if you need to like Raigeki something, throw this guy in the field first, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to Raigeki you, you can't banish, you don't get to do things. So that's really important. And of course, this guy, honestly, he's probably the best monster to just draw. I'll just show you. Triple Jug and Spiritualist. This is my last monster. I only run 3 different monsters, 8 total. But Jug and the Spiritualist is going to be really, really important in terms of just maintaining field control. Basically, this guy's a walking vanities. If he's on the field, another player can special summon. Also, he has another effect that a lot of people kind of forget about, but when he's on the field, you can discard 1 random card from your hand, destroy all special summon monsters on the field. What that allows you to do is, even if your opponent has an established board, you can summon this guy. Yeah, it's a -1 when you use his effect, but at the same time, you're going to be able to clear out your entire opponent's board. If they have stuff that would allow them to like float or something, well, guess what? You can't special summon. So, like a Cosmo spaceship gets destroyed, it doesn't get its effect. It's really nice. Basically, you just allow your deck to be able to control the board a little bit more. This guy has amazing synergy with a card like Spellbook of Fate. That's why people have been running it in spellbooks for like forever. But just being able to have a Fate set, usually with a Jalgan on board, your opponent's not going to be able to special summon to get past him, and if they try to normal summon something to attack over him, you can just Fate it, and then they kind of cry. So that's really cool. So that's all the monsters. It's a super concise monster lineup, but with cards like your dualities and your card of Demise, you're really going to be able to get to your monsters very easily. So that's not really an issue. And of course, you don't want to have too many monsters in your in your hand or anything. For when you use card of Demise, you don't want to be discarding stuff. You usually want to have a lot of things that you can set. So, anyways, next up is going to be spells, and we are running triple Spellbook of Secrets because duh. 2 Spellbooks of the Master, only 2. It works really well at 2. One copy of Star Hall. This is something that if you decide to switch something out, that would be what I'd recommend to switch out. You can switch that for, another trap or something. But I think it's pretty good. Just being able to, if you have a couple of spells in your hand, you can just activate them. And it's like, okay, you can get your Kaiku up to like 2100 really easily. And 2100 Kaiku actually isn't the easiest thing to kill. So it's pretty good in a couple of different, matchups and stuff. And of course, just being able to boost up your attack is always nice, but it is Twin Twister bait. That said, if it gets hit with if it gets destroyed and they don't do it at the correct time to make it miss timing, you can of course get that search and oh yeah, it has a surge effect. I don't know. You guys Google it if you don't know what it does. Next up, 2 copies of Grand Spellbook Tower. I think you need two, just to be able to get that search engine off. If you don't use both, or if you don't have a second one, if the first one gets destroyed, then you're just kind of out of luck. 2 copies of Spellbook of Fate, because it's super important, and we have the access to 2 now, so that's really good. 2 copies of Spellbook of Eternity. With 2 Fates especially, you're going to want to be able to get your banished spellbooks back. I think that having 2 copies of it is really important. Because we're not running any copies of Spellbook Library of the Crescent, we might end up in situations where we have to banish a Fate, have to banish an Eternity with Fate to get its full effect off. And just having the second Eternity in the deck somewhere is pretty important. Yeah, it can be a little cloggy sometimes, but it's worth that risk. Next up, 1 copy of Spellbook of Wisdom. You really only need 1 right now, I think. Again, you could pop that up to 2, but it can get a little dead drawy sometimes. And you're able to get it back if you need to. Like, you've got Double Eternity, you've got Master. You can always pretty much do something with it to get it back if you really, really think you need it. So, but probably the most popular trap card right now is something like a Solemn Warning, Solemn Strike. So that's really not going to help against that. So yeah, just having the 1 is fine. Next up, 1 copy of Spellbook of Power. Very good card just generally, just being able to attack over certain things. Of course, we're only running the 1 because we're not running like a zillion monsters that have a lot of attack. But just having the 1 to be able to toolbox if you need it. Very good. And then 1 copy of Spellbook of Life. It's not as live as it usually is in my other Spellbook decks and stuff, but Spellbook of Life is still a very, very good card. It's a little bit conditional, but at the same time, having a monster reborn that you can search is always a really good asset. So I wouldn't want to take it out. So that's it for Spellbooks. Let's go ahead and check out the other spells. Obviously, we're running triple Card of Demise because it's super, super important. This is kind of why a lot of these slow decks are really good right now. It's a card that I wouldn't necessarily consider broken, but I would consider very, very good. And just being able to draw those 3 cards when you set your entire hand, it allows a lot of other decks to play, which I think is necessary in the game right now. Of course, you do have to discard your all your cards in your hand during the end phase, but that's a very, very small price to pay for being able to essentially reload your hand after you've, or sometimes before you've done anything. It's just really good. And then, of course, if you're running triple Demise, triple Duality kind of goes hand in hand with that. They kind of, they both have the same activation condition of, not being able to special summon. So, it's really easy to just kind of go into this after after a Demise or before or whatever. So yeah, Duality, Demise, you run those together. 1 Raigeki because it's nice for dealing with established boards, especially if you have something like a Kaiku or a Jowgen on board, so stuff just can't float. And then this one is this is something that I think is super important. If you're going to be running spellbooks right now, having this card is going to be super important. 2 copies of Moon Mirror Shield. I love this card right now, especially if you can just equip it to a Jowgen or something. Your opponent just can't beat it, unless they have, some sort of spell trap destruction. This card, it just allows you to attack over pretty much everything, and that's really good. So basically, for anybody who doesn't know what this card does, when you equip it to a monster, whenever that monster battles an opponent's monster, during the damage step, change your monster's attack to whatever theirs is, plus 100. So, say your opponent has a Cosmo Dark Destroyer or something. Well, guess what? Jowgen's going to be 3,100, and it activates during the damage step. So your opponent's Honest doesn't even work like that. You can't. Yours has priority or whatever. I don't know, whatever. You can attack past pretty much anything, anytime you want. So that's really nice. Next up, and this is going to be traps. It's a really, really simple trap lineup. And you can make any changes to this you want, I think. But this is pretty good for me. I've got one strike, one warning. You could up this to two. I've got, instead of the second one, I've got a bottomless, because it's like $1 or something, and this is like 50. But yeah, you could easily up that to two. Although, bottomless doesn't have a life point cost, which is really nice sometimes. Especially if you're like getting the heck beaten out of you, and it's like, oh man, I sure do wish I had a trap that I could activate right now. Unfortunately, I don't have 1,500 life points to spend. Well, guess what? Bottomless is there for you. Next up, triple lose one turn. Oh, this card's fantastic. You're always going to be normal summoning stuff with this, basically, and this card's pretty much always live. I mean, the only time it's not is if you've activated a Spellbook of Life, but generally speaking, that's kind of like last resort card. This card, sometimes it gets a little cloggy, but usually speaking, you're just able to, slow your opponent down. What's really nice is that it doesn't necessarily stop them from pushing, but it does slow their push down. So if they try to do something like, some big explosive play, during your turn, you can just summon a Jalgan and then, discard a card, and all the stuff that they were, like, really looking forward to being able to use next turn is now dead. So that's really nice. Also, it pairs really well with Kaiku, who's able to attack over most things when they're in defense mode. So yeah, really good. And then last up, 2 copies of Storming Mirror Force. Yes, Storming Mirror Force, not Drowning Mirror Force. We are running Storming because we always want to be able to keep our Jalgan the Spiritualist on the field. Storming Mirror Force obviously is going to be able to let us do that. Yes, it only puts stuff back in the hand as opposed to back in the deck, but at the same time, you always, in my opinion, for this sort of deck, you always want to maintain field control. Any sort of field presence, you need it. You just can't have your monsters getting killed. With stuff like Clifford's, Clifford Demise, you can afford to run Drowning Mirror Force because you don't necessarily mind if your monsters get destroyed. You can special summon them back later. With this, you really, really need your monsters on the field. You don't want to let them die. And so that's why I'm running this instead. Just don't want them to die. So that's going to be it for the main deck, obviously. And now we're just going to go ahead and go to the extra deck. Now, keep in mind, extra deck is entirely unnecessary. You do not need any cards in this. You could I've actually done this. Just not run one and pretend you're running Monarchs, and then people will be like, oh man, I've got to play differently because, I don't want to get Monarched. So they'll, either try to, do some, they try to do all these plays that's like, oh man, I don't want to get Monarched. And then you're just like, oh, guess what? It's Spellbooks. That said, if you're, if you do want to just run these extra cards and never use any of them, because you really don't, generally speaking, have 2 monsters on the field at the same time. Unless it's maybe unless one of them is Jalgan, in which case you can't special summon anyway. But anyways, let's go ahead and show you. These are all cards that are useful. Shining Elf, Herald of Pure Light, Dagosto, Phoenix, and Downard. They're all good. Not really a lot to say about any of them. You never summon any of them, and you don't. If you have to choose, say you're at locals, and it's like, man, I could either get all these cards or get a sandwich and just eat it. Just get the sandwich. You don't need these. So yeah, that's it for Spellbook, Demise, whatever. I think this is a pretty good deck. I wouldn't necessarily classify it as being the best Demise deck. I think probably Clifford Demise is the best one, but this is still very usable. And it's got certain things that make it good. Obviously access to Jalgan is going to be amazing. Access to an ease of use for Moon Mirror Shield, just because you can go back to the top of your deck if it's destroyed, and you can obviously just get that extra draw with Grand Spellbook Tower. And then, of course, access to Spellbook of Fate. These are all why you're going to, if you're going to run this deck, those are going to be why you're running it. So just keep those in mind if you decide to build this. I'd say definitely test it out on DN or YGO Pro or something before you decide to build it, just to see if it is the sort of thing that you'd want to run. But of course, it's a heavy back row deck with lockdown field presence and lots of draws. That's pretty much the entire idea. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Later.